Tonight, we're going to be putting Nersa in the hot seat over the power problems that South Africa is facing. The group's member in charge of electricity, Thembani Bukula, is in studio. Mark Ingham is our co-host tonight. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Thembani, let's start off with trying to get some understanding of whether as a country, as Nersa, as government, as policymakers, we have a consensus around what brings us to the crisis that we're in now.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you. I think we have consensus, and I think if I start way back in 2008, the first crisis or load shedding that we had in 2008 was caused by our demand outstripping the supply. So we had more demand than we could supply. But the current challenges, our demand right now is less than what we had in 2007. So the current challenge really emanates from the below par performance of the Eskom generation fleet, and that is why we are having these challenges. Our generators are not producing or performing at the level that would enable them to supply the load, because the load is less than what we had in 2007.
Thembani, Lindsay Williams in Cape Town. There was a meeting on Monday afternoon and it lasted for around a couple of hours, and it was to 100 stakeholders, so-called. That was agricultural business, business in general, business organisations. And the CEO of Eskom said at one point, apparently, and it was widely reported, that if anything goes wrong drastically, then there could be an entire blackout throughout the whole of South Africa, and the ramifications of that, in other words, getting the grid back up again, could take weeks. Did you see that, and what is your response to that?
I did not see that interview, but I know what he is referring to. When you have a collapse of the system or a blackout, for each generation unit, it takes up to 8 hours to ramp it up to full load. And if you look at the different generation and stations and the network, it can take you up to 2 weeks to get the system back into full load. But it doesn't mean that in that 2 weeks there would not be pockets of electricity that are being supplied.
Thembani, you're a regulator, and from companies that I'm close to and I advise, it's quite clear to me that the most expensive electricity is that which you don't have. Mm-hmm. Is it perhaps not a time now that we bite the bullet? Cost-reflective tariffs was again referred to just now, that we really have to, from a commercial point of view, get pricing up to a level which is sustainable for Eskom in the future?
I think that the pricing that we have for Eskom, we have an electricity pricing policy that said that we should have our cost-reflective tariffs within a 5-year period, and I think we are a little bit over the 5-year period. But the pricing that we have and the tariffs that we are having for Eskom are at a level where Eskom can cover the full cost of their license activities and get a reasonable return. And yes, prices will continue to go up, but affordability is also an issue that must be considered. We can't just crank them up. Yes, we know that the sustainability of Eskom is also something that we must consider. It is that delicate balance that we are dealing with.
If we've met the thresholds in terms of how high tariffs can go, what other options exist? And to ask the question differently, what other role as the regulator can you play to help bring about a solution to the potential blackout that everybody is talking about?
I think as a regulator and a custodian and enforcer of the Electricity Regulation Act, our function is to create an environment that facilitates additional investments, and as we speak, we are doing a consultation around the embedded generation, which is the use of either solar PVs in different houses, but it has its own intricacies, so it is something that we are considering. We are also facilitating and allowing those who want to access the grid, third parties that can sell and generate electricity from different places. We also have to look at the funding of Eskom, and all of the things that would ensure that if we cannot generate the electricity enough of what is needed, we can at least have other measures like using the electricity efficiently and sparingly.
It certainly sounds like all hands are on board as South Africa looks for a solution to the power crisis. A very big thank you to Thembani Bukula, who is the member in charge of electricity at